Hello everybody, I'm Cameron and welcome back to another lesson in Python. Today we're going to be talking about if and else statements. So this is very exciting. This is a big step in our code for us. If statements are a very important thing because they allow us to write programs that behave differently based on a certain set of circumstances. So let's start. I think a good sample one to do will be let's make a program where if the user enters in a number, it'll tell them whether it's positive or negative. So let's start by making a variable. We're going to call it my number, and we're going to set my number equal to float. We'll do float in case they want to enter a decimal. Float input, and let's just give a message. Enter a number. Just like that. All right. Now, here's where we have our if statement. So something you guys may have noticed before in Python is that spaces matter, particularly at the beginning of your code. If I was to try and do that, we get an error, right? The reason being is because Python is a language designed so that in order to do certain things, the spacing actually matters. And I'll show you guys what that means in a second. Let's make our if statement first. So we start out with the word if. And now we could type in our condition. So if we want our number to be positive, it'll be greater than 0. So if my number, and now we could just use the greater than symbol, if my number is greater than 0. And there we go. Now we put our colon in, and we press the enter key. Now you'll notice that the IDE should automatically start you out tabbed. Python tabbing is 4 spaces, by the way, so if you want to press the tab key, you could do that, or you could type out 1, 2, 3, 4, and there we could start going. But it should automatically just put you there. But this tabbed out, it's tabbed out for a reason, is what I'm trying to say. Now, if this statement right here is true, then it's going to do whatever code is tabbed out. So let's print your number is positive. There we go. Any code that's tabbed out to this length, we could have 10 lines of code, 100 lines of code. We could have as many lines as possible. Every single line of code that's tabbed out under this if statement will only be activated if it's true. So let's try and run this. So let's run this, and we're going to enter 1. And there we go. Your number is positive. Let's try that again, but entering a negative number. Like I'll enter -1. And see, it didn't do this line of code because this was not true. If this is false, it'll skip over every single line of code that's tabbed out right there. So we could, to test this theory, we could have another code below here and print end of program. Let's just type that. So we get this line, since it's not tabbed out now, should always print no matter what. Even if this is true or false, since this is put back to the left as far as we could go. It's not tabbed out anymore. This should always run. So let's do that. We're going to enter -5. And look at that. It skips over this line that's tabbed out, but it prints the one that says end of program. So let's try adding an else statement now. What an else statement does is if the if statement isn't true, then it'll do something. It'll do it only if the if statement is false. See, it'll say end of program right now no matter what. Even if we do, let's try this again. If we do enter a positive number, it'll still say end of program. What if we want something to print out only if the number is negative? Well, then we could add this else statement. So we actually tab back to do the else. We could do else just like that, and then we press a colon. So this will only be activated now if this statement is false. And now likewise we have to tab out after that else, just like the if statement. We're going to print your number is negative, just like that. And let's run that now. So let's enter a number. We're going to enter -5, and there we go. It says your number is negative because it checks this statement. This is false. As soon as this is false, it jumps right to that else. And now, since that else is there, we go here and we print everything that's tabbed out here. So if the statement was true, then we would never go to this else and get to any of this code that's tabbed out here. So let's try that again. Let's try doing a positive number just to test that. See, your number is positive, end of program, and never gets up to this line that's your number is negative. But what about a problem like this? Look at our code as it is right now. We're checking to see if it's greater than 0, and then if not, we assume that it's negative. What if we run into something where we have a number that is 0? So let's just enter 0. It's going to tell us our number is negative. Now that is not the case because 0 is neither positive nor negative. But how we have it coded right now is it can only be one or the other. And 0 is not greater than 0, so this ends up being false. So since it's false, it goes right to that else code, and it does this. Well, what if we want to check for multiple conditions? We could actually use something called an if-else. Now, most of the times, this will be simply if-else. It'll be like that. Or, I'm sorry. It'll be else if. That is the notation that it's usually used in most languages. Python actually simplifies this, though. It'll be elif. Elif is short for else if, so it checks if this is true, we do this line. If it's not true, then if the following statement is true, which we haven't typed yet, that's why we're getting that red. But let's see. Elif, my number, is less than 0. So now it's saying if my number is greater than 0, then we're going to do this code here. If it's not greater than 0, then if it's less than 0, we'll do this. So now, if we type in 0, it doesn't do either of these two lines because it checks. Is it greater than 0? No. Now it's going to check to see if it's less than 0. 0 is not less than 0 either, so it's not going to do this line either, and it's just going to go right to the end of the program. What we can do, though, is we could add another else statement. So this else statement now will only activate if every previous statement in line with that turns out to be false. So if both this one is false and this one is false, now this else statement will activate. So else, then we could say print your, I want to capitalize that just to keep it consistent, your number is 0. And there we go. Let's see if this works now. So let's start with a positive number. You got 5? Your number is positive. Let's do a negative one. Negative 5. Your number is negative. Now let's try with 0. Your number is 0. So that's how we get to there. That's the if, the else if, and the else statement. Now another thing that's important to note is with these comparisons, we could also just check to see, what if we want to just see if it's greater than or equal to 0? We could just do that. If it's greater than or equal to 0. Now if it's equal to 0, we could get rid of this whole thing because we don't want this. If our number is equal to 0 now, it's going to be, it's going to do this. So we could say your number is at least 0. And in that case, we don't really need to have all this stuff. So we could just simplify this. We could just make an else statement that says your number is below 0. So let's try running that. Now if we enter 0, your number is at least 0. So that greater than or equals to and the less than or equals to are very important. But what if we want to just check to see if a number is equal to another number? So we want to say your number is 0 or your number is not 0. Do we just do one equal sign like that? See how we're getting that red there? That's actually because we cannot do this because the equal sign in Python is going to set a value. It's looking to now set my number to 0. It's getting very confused. Even though this if is here, the function of a single equal sign is actually set. And that's always going to be the case. But how do we use the equal sign as a comparison? What we actually have to do is just put two equal sign. Two equal signs are going to be a comparison. A single equal sign is to a sign. So this now is comparing my number and 0. So if we run this, enter a number 0, your number is 0. Let's try entering a number that's not 0. Your number is not 0. So there you go, guys. You could have greater than, less than, equal to. You could do this with numbers. You could check if a string is equal to another string. Like, let's see. My string equals enter a word. And we're going to see if my string equals, how about dog? And then we're going to print your word was dog. And then we're going to say your word was not dog. Let's try this now. Actually, this is going to be one thing we have to do first is also get rid of that float, right? Because if we're entering a string value, we don't want to be typing in, we don't want it to set it to a float, rather. So let's enter a word. We're going to do dog, and it says your word was dog. Now let's try that again. I'm going to enter the word cat, and it says your word was not dog. So there we go, guys. That is the basics of if and else statements. An interesting thing, too, is you could do if statements within if statements. So we could say, if my string was dog, let's actually do two inputs. Let's have my string and my number equals float. We'll do float for this one now again. So float input, enter a number. And you see, guys, I'm using single quotes and double quotes kind of like interchangeably. Obviously, the one has to match the other in a pair, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, if I were you, I'd stick to do something consistent. I'm just using the differing ones to show you guys how it doesn't really matter too much. But anyways, guys, enter a number. Now we're going to make if my string is equal to dog. Now we're going to also do if my number is equal to 10. Now we're going to do print your number is equal to 10. All right, so it is only going to print this, though, if our string is also dog. So let's see this. We'll run this. So enter a word, dog, enter a number, 10. Your word was dog, your number is equal to 10. So now if I try running this with cat, if we enter cat here, it's just, we still have to enter a number, so I'll enter 10 now. And all it says is your word was not dog. It never says your number is equal to 10 because this if statement here is part of this code that only runs if dog is true. So only if my string equals dog, only if that's true, then it checks for the number. If it's not true, then the only line of code that runs is just down here on line 11. So your word was not dog. So there you go, guys. That's a little bit of if statements within if statements. And yeah, it can be a little bit tricky, I know, guys, in the beginning, but anything that's tabbed, so when it's true, the code that's tabbed is what's going to run. So since this if statement is tabbed right here, it's only going to run if this prior if statement was true. But there you guys have it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Ask me in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.